So thank you so much for being willing to do this interview.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So your name's there so people know you're Valerie. Okay. And so maybe if we could start off with, if you could say what your current position is, how long you've been working there, and then how long you were a teacher, and then we'll launch into the questions I have here.
Okay. So my current position is a site coordinator at UNH for their professional development and training department. And my role is really to help organize the workshops that they run and to be sort of the face of the program. So if people have a workshop in person, I'm the person that greets them. I send out the communications and deal with the individuals that are both teaching and participating in the workshops.
Awesome. Fantastic. And how long as a teacher, and what did you teach?
Um, I taught English and writing for about 15 years. Most of that time was teaching high school in Manchester. And I had a couple of years where I was a writing consultant and an adjunct writing teacher at Riviere. Basically when my kids were really young and I needed to go part-time. So that was the sort of avenue that I chose to kind of keep myself working and but have some more flexibility, I guess.
Fantastic. So let's launch into our questions. What changed for you to go from liking being a teacher to deciding it was no longer a good fit?
You know, I went back to full-time teaching after I had children, and my previous experience was before I had children. So I think that just for an English teacher in particular, there was so much work to take home that I felt like it was putting a strain on my family. And I was either giving and not doing my best at work, or I was coming home feeling like I dropped the ball at home and wasn't really doing either thing very well. And so I started to feel unhappy about my job.
Got it. And was there a tipping point for you that you remember? It's like, okay, I got to do something about this. And if so, what was that?
There were I had a couple tipping points. Obviously, the pandemic was a big factor because it had me put more strain on me. I was working really late into the night and I was doing more work at home. Just changed the job changed. And then I turned 40. And so I was less okay with still being unhappy. So that was a couple of years ago. And nothing was getting easier. I kept thinking, once I get through this one hurdle, everything will be better. And that wasn't happening. I also had a colleague tell me that she never, like in teaching, she told me she never gets the Sunday blues. And I was like, oh, it kind of was like a light bulb moment for me where I was like, everyone isn't as unhappy as I am. And I think I kind of thought we were all trudging through this together. And I thought, well, maybe there are people who like this career and are doing better with and managing the stress of the job better than I am. And maybe I need to look for something different.
Good deal. What was your biggest fear or your biggest fears about doing, like leaving education, and how did you deal with them?
Um, One of my fears was just, I guess it was a little bit of a fear, was the risk of leaving because you get sort of auto renewed in your contract and then you break your contract if you leave at any certain point. So I had to leave without another job lined up. So that was a risk for me financially and career-wise. My other option was to accept the contract and then risk losing my certifications by breaking that contract, or possibly being forced, not exactly, but as much as one can force a person to work into the next year. And I really didn't want that to happen. But the other risk, I think, my like internal fears were that I was going to make a bad choice and pick another job that I was going to be just as unhappy with, and that maybe it was me and not the career. So that was another one.
How did you how did you work through that fear about, I'm just going to pick another job that also doesn't work for me, or career?
Um, I guess I just decided that it didn't matter that I what there are actually very few other jobs that force you to stay in the same manner that teaching is. So it's like, well, maybe I'll make a bad choice and that's going to be okay. And then I will have to make another choice, and that this might not be the be all and end all for me. Um, I also stopped talking about my job changing with people who weren't supportive, because I think that was adding to some of my fears. Other people's fears for me. What do you mean you're going to leave? You know? Um, and I don't know. I guess I decided I was going to go into it more informed, and I started to do some research and reading and stuff like that.
Yeah. And can you talk more about what sorts of research that you did to start like learning what might be out there that would be a good fit for me?
Um, well, I started doing some of the things that I used to ask my students to do. Like I started to look at those personality assessments, and I really felt like I was starting over completely, like the same way that they were going into the world. And so I started to do that. I looked online, and I knew that I needed to find my transferable skills and try and find something that I would like, but also find somebody that would want to hire me. And so I was sort of looking at that. I came up with some weird stuff through the assessments.
Do you remember by any chance? Because I know
One,
it could be all over the place.
yeah, one of them said I should be a judge. It's like, well, that's going to take a while. Um, and yeah, just random things like that where I was like, okay, well, maybe there's something about that in my personality that I can use. And I went to the library. I brought my children down to the Manchester Public Library, and they have like a section like this big on careers. And I took out what color is your parachute? Because I remember my mom reading that years ago. And I did some of the exercises. I don't know. I never really found myself like, okay, I know exactly what I want to do. But I sort of used it to update my social media and to work on my resume and things like that.
So a couple things here I want to follow up on, either highlight and follow up on. I love what you said about like, okay, be a judge, all right, but maybe there's something about that that I can learn from. And I think that's a really good point, because sometimes I find, um, clients get like, what's up with that? Like judge, airplane technician, and hairdresser. Like, you're kidding me. But it's what you said, I think, is really wise. Like, what are the qualities that make a good judge? And so how can I apply that to contexts that might be more relevant to me or interesting to me?
Yeah. And
So go ahead.
and there is some sort of something about the managerial, managing the courtroom, managing the classroom. Like there was something that drew me to teaching to begin with. And I don't know, I didn't want to go into something that would make me desperately unhappy. So there was something there there's something there that I do like. I just
Yeah.
figure it out.
And also that I didn't want to go into something that made me desperately unhappy is that I love that you said that, because it also ties into what you said about like, what about if you made the bad choice? And I love that you said, it's like, okay, I'll just make a better choice next, if this isn't the right one. That I think so often people think they have to have the whole big picture trajectory clearly in focus to make a move. It's like, no, just the next step. And then you'll get more data about, okay, this works for me, this doesn't work for me. So I can imagine that really took a lot of the pressure off in terms of, I've got to make the perfect, decision.
Yeah. And just also, I don't know, I do have a hard time trusting myself and making that I am going to make that right move. And I think just because I feel like I spent so many years going down a path that wasn't right for me, climbing that ladder, whatever you're doing in your profession. And then I was like, oh, what if I do that again? So there's some self-doubt that I had to kind of like push away and say, okay, well, I can't stay here in this place. So like you said, the next step.
And so reminding yourself that like, if it's not the right decision, then I'll just tweak it. That helped you get over the, like, what about if I make, what about if I do that again? Fear.
Yeah.
Did that help? So you didn't and I love those exercises, those self-assessments and what color is your parachute there. Yeah. Fantastic. Now, so in your case, it wasn't like, okay, I want to be a project manager or I want to be a this or that. So what, let's sort of deconstruct this. So you did identify your transferable skills. So what were the ones that stood out for you? Like, hey, I could bring these to any position.
Communication, some management skills. I have some technology skills. I'm very responsible. Did I say presentation?
Nope.
That was fun. That I have a lot of empathy. And so I get along well with my colleagues. I got along well with my students. Parents trusted me. I'm trustworthy.
All right. So those were some of the
skills, really, when you learn the lingo.
Yeah, fortunately, more and more employers are recognizing how critical those are. So, so both the soft skills and then just personal qualities, you were able to get clearer on, like, this is what I bring. And so you've got that, but you're not real clear, like, this is what I want to go for. What did you do next?
Well, I started looking at jobs and just seeing what was out there. Sometimes things were coming up that I didn't even really know what the job was. And then applying for jobs, I got a lot of rejections. I applied for a lot of positions. And I would some days just do the, like, send out a bunch of applications. And then other days I'd be like, I'm going to work really hard on this one and really try to find something perfect. But I was kind of initially in a place where I was like, I'll take anything. I just want to make a change really fast. And it didn't happen fast, despite all the talk about the job market being so great right now. I really struggled to figure out what I wanted to do. I had a few ideas of types of jobs I wanted to do. And then kind of in the back of my mind, I thought maybe I want to do something entrepreneurial. And so I was all over the map. That's kind of how I always have been, all over the map.
Ah, and so what were some of the jobs you were thinking might be a good fit?
Well, I was sometimes looking at things that I had some of the skill set for. So I thought about technical writing, recruiting, admissions, not admissions, but academic advising. I was thinking that would be something that I would be good at. I really enjoyed my psychology classes in college, and that was something I kept going back to. I was like, what was I good at? And so that was something that I was good at, but not, I guess, committed to going back to school for. So those were some of the ideas that I had. Sometimes I was come across something that sounded like it was in my wheelhouse, like but I didn't really want to do it, like something with curriculum.
Got it. Now, did you do any or much networking at all, or is it mostly like job postings?
I did some networking. I did find somebody on LinkedIn who was a former colleague who had risen the ranks at his company, and I reached out to him, and he did get me an interview that actually went really badly.
How so?
It was a Zoom interview, and my internet crashed 6 times, I think. It was just a disastrous interview. And I actually reached out to the company and said, um, would you give me another interview? And they never wrote me back. So that was I guess, a minor humiliation in the process. Um, but I did try to like add to my LinkedIn community. And I was updating. I did watch some videos on how to make myself more marketable, how to get more views, things like that. I wouldn't say that I was very successful in that department, though.
Did you do any like informational interviews at all? Like what does such and such position do or not?
Um, no, I don't think I did that.
Okay. When you think about, oh, actually, before I ask you this question, any thoughts about how you put the Zoom 6 time crash interview in perspective and moved on? Anything that you did to like let go of that?
Um, I think that I just sort of had that cliche, well, I guess it wasn't meant to be. Maybe I'm meant for something else. Maybe there's a bigger purpose. Maybe I'll find my dream job next, and I wasn't supposed to take that one. And I'd actually had a job offer at that same place that I turned down. So um, that uh, maybe there was something that wasn't quite right about it anyway.
And that job offer, was that after the Zoom disaster or?
No, that was almost a year before.
Oh,
I've
wow.
been,
Okay.
I think I started thinking about leaving 2 years ago.
Okay.
Um, and so I, s- I rushed right out and went for the first thing and then realized it wasn't right.
Got it. As you look at your like your job search process, any advice for other teachers wanting to get out of the field, both in terms of what you did that you think was worked well and what you, if you had a do-over or like next time around, whatever you would do differently?
Um, well, I guess one thing I would advise teachers is to just examine whether the problem is a temporary or a permanent problem as far as why they want to leave, because there were a lot of good things about the job. And you know, I think I had been unhappy long enough to know that it was just not right for me. But I think that anyone who feels like they're like in the wrong role or just ambling down the wrong path even farther, um, should not be afraid to start over. I think teaching is a vocation, and that there are people that are just really truly like have a calling for that profession. And that's what I have children. And so that's what I want their teachers to be like. I don't want them to have somebody as their that they see every day that isn't really in it. And so I guess the other thing is that starting over for me did mean I had to take a pay cut. I had to be entry level again. And I don't know if that would be true for somebody who was maybe a computer teacher or somebody who had a different skill set. But for me, if my skill set is to be in management, I didn't feel like I was ready to be hired as a manager. I have to learn a new business a little bit. And so that was kind of humbling. And, but it's definitely worth it. I'm so much happier. Um, it's like a weight is lifted off me. I have my nights to myself that I can spend with my family. And, I have that like flexibility and other things that I really needed to feel like I could be a working mother, that I didn't feel like I had in my last role, which is interesting because people think of teaching as a mother's job because you have that summer off and things like that. But it's hard. It's a hard job too. So
Yeah, I'd like to dive a little more into um, the aspects of teaching that no longer were good for you? Because it's interesting. So you mentioned about sort of like the negative lifestyle impact of like working into the night, not time for your family, et cetera. One of the things that sometimes I hear from teacher clients who, who want to get out of the field is like dealing with like classroom management or dealing with politics. Like those are two big ones. Was there anything about on the job that was like, I'm just so over that? Or was it more just how it impacted your life?
There have been changes over time that have made that like made you feel like it wasn't going to get better, or that you weren't able to do the job as well as you wanted to. Working in the city, my classes were very overcrowded. Not physically, but as far as the workload, having, if you teach students how to write a short story and you receive 90 of them, plus you have other classes to teach, it was like, well, this is not a reasonable amount for me to do my best work correcting, giving feedback, so it kind of started to feel like I wasn't really doing what I was supposed to be doing. And the job was becoming, well, not impossible, but impossible to do within a time frame that I was willing to dedicate to it. Behavior issues are always a part of teaching. So that was something that I don't know, I didn't have a lot of problems with my students. I liked my students.
Neat. Now, what about this? Can you say more of what it's been like starting out as a newbie and the learning curve and learning like the rules of an engagement in a whole new world? Anything that you want to share that you think that would help other teachers?
I guess it is a little bit, I think I said humbling to be starting in a new role, having to be the person who is asking questions instead of answering them. Sometimes I'm in have a Zoom going on in the background where I'm not the instructor and I have to not jump in with my thoughts. So just, unless you're going to another role where you are the boss, that is it's a very different role to be, taking direction from other people, and not being the facilitator entirely. I guess.
What about this kind of related to asking questions? One of the things that, remembering experiences I've had being a new employee in a company and then just thinking about clients sharing their new hire experiences. Anything you want to say about that sort of can feel awkward or anxiety producing balancing act between being willing to ask the questions you need to ask, but not wanting to seem like high maintenance. Like, I don't want to take up all my supervisor's time.
Yes.
I think, that, like, anything you want to say about how you've personally navigated that? Because that's a tough one.
Yeah, it is, because I do feel like I'm always bothering somebody with something. I do a couple of things and I hit a roadblock that I don't know the answer and I can't move forward. And then I start to feel like I'm not being productive. And there was a kind of, that my current position has really been nice that they dedicated a lot of time to training me. And that would be something that I would look for. Again, people like get that vibe that they're going to take the time to train you, because even though at the beginning it felt like I wasn't contributing much, I do feel like there are some things that I know how to do really well now already. And I could advise a new person coming in on some of those things. And so that's a short-lived, I've only been in this role for a couple of months. And so that was a short-lived sort of thing.
Neat. Now, what about this? I actually just dawned on me. I want to go back to the interview to get this job. So one of the things in the whole career change field, we talk about if you're a career changer in interviews, first you need to show them like, hey, I can do this. Like I'm one of the in crowd that could do this job. But then after hopefully you've established that fact is to talk about, and here's what my unique background adds how it adds extra value. I'm curious, can you recount your interview or interviews, I imagine it's plural, about how you address I really can do this job, even though I come from a whole different field?
Yeah, I think, honestly, this was one of the few places that I was able to break through what is basically a barrier of technology that is now out there, just to even communicate with a person, because I felt like a lot of places where I applied, my application just got sifted into a pile through like an algorithm or something. Like I don't think it ever saw a human. So once I was able to actually speak to the first person, they start out just by asking questions. And so the questions that I think that I was able to kind of show my value on were how I handle problem solving skills. I think those were things that I was able to highlight as far as, in any job that you're in, there are going to be stressful, bad things that happen. And, just how do you manage those moments? And I think that's something that teachers do all day long. And so that was something that I was able to present, okay, well, if all of the technology shuts down in the middle of a Zoom, what are you going to do? Okay, well, it's not the end of the world. Here's what I would do. Things like that.
I love it. What do you remember some other questions that you were asked that you were able to showcase your transferable skills?
Well, they still ask for your strengths and weaknesses and things like that. Some questions like what sort of an environment do you want to be in? Anytime that I could bring up some of my technology skills, for example, I thought that was something that people don't really think of when they think of teachers. But especially in the last couple of years, we've been doing, teaching online, creating visual presentations, using all sorts of the library technology and things like that, finding things on the internet that are like really great databases for literature and things like that. So just anytime I was able to add that in as something, I think that was valuable as well.
And were you asked directly about sort of like what makes you think you could do this job since you've been a teacher all your life kind of thing? Were you asked that bluntly or?
Not really. I think not. I think because because this role is within the educational realm, there was some kind of understanding about that already. And while there was a part of me that wanted to look for jobs outside of education, just to possibly make more money or to try something completely new, it was a sort of a safe place for me to start, just because they do have some idea. Like a lot of times they were asking me the question and we're like, well, of course you have already done this, or you know about this. And then I don't know, I'm having a hard time recalling specific questions from the interview.
Okay, but you bring up a really good point. Is what you did is a version, what's called the two-step career change, is stay in the field or industry, but do a different job. And then once you get more experience in that job, then you can pivot outside that industry. So that's a good point. I forgot. It's like, wait a minute, you're in higher ed,
Yeah.
not, but
But I do think like when I was first reading about staying, because I did the research and I said, I know one option is to stay, find a different job in my field. And I was like, well, maybe I can be a health teacher. Maybe I should be the librarian. Like it was all still in that same, like in my contract and on my steps, and something that would be an easier transition. And, I really am not doing the same job that I was doing before at all. But there was some level of comfort because it was still within education.
and speaking of comfort, anything else that you like did to sort of like manage your anxiety and any fears that came up as you're going through the process, especially like you're not hearing back because of the applicant tracking systems, not,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I had a lot of woe is me moments. Um, I I looked for like inspirational little stories and things like that. I tried to like lift my spirits. I sometimes I didn't. I just took a day off of thinking about it. Um, and it is kind of a grind to look for a job. And so I looked at it as like, this is the work that I have to do. I want to improve my life, and it's going to be worth it. So that was, and then just, just knowing that I couldn't stay put. So it was kind of like, well, if I want to get out of the situation, I kind of have no choice. I have to make these changes. And I did a lot of other things. I like changed my passwords to things about my children, like not to tell you my passwords, but like, like things that reminded me what was motivating me. And so that I'd be like, okay, this is not as upsetting because sometimes really horrible things happen to people. So just having that perspective of like, what really matters to me, my children's happiness, that I can be home and be their mother more. Whatever, I don't know, little moments that I can have throughout the day where I was like reminded of the reason I was doing it.
That's a great idea. Remind yourself of the why. So anything else as we start to wind up here, when you look at, excuse me, what you did, what your process was, the challenges, how you overcame them, things that worked, things that didn't, any other advice for a teacher who's thinking, I really want to leave this field?
I think that if you decide you really want to leave the field, that you have to do it, and that the starting over process is not as long as you think it's going to be, and that ambling further down the wrong path, it just means you have farther to walk back. Kind of like when you're lost and you just keep going, know you're going the wrong way. That risks are rewarded in life, and that's something that I try to remember. I ask other people, because sometimes you can be blinded by your own thoughts of yourself. And if you have people in your teaching community that can point out the things that are different about you, that can be helpful. I looked at some of my old writing from when I was a kid. Yeah, go for it.
And when you saw the writing from you as a kid, like it reminded you like, wow, this is a real strength of mine, a talent of mine. It was back then even.
Yeah. And just some of the funny things that I wrote. And I was like, oh, look at this interest I had.
Neat. And that's such an important, as I'm sure you remember from good old What Color's Your Parachute, such important place for clues about strengths and what your superpowers are. It's like, what were you drawn to as a kid?
I had a funny little comment in one of my writings that said, maybe I'll be a teacher for a little while.
Wow. Talk about being prescient, huh?
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah.
So fantastic. I'm going to stop the recording and then we'll just stay on the line, talk a little bit more. So thank
Okay.
you very much. I really appreciate this.
You're welcome. Thank you for taking an interest.
Yeah. Okay, so we're back because I was going to say off air, but yeah, off our recording. Valerie just shared a really cool example. I just want to set up is we're talking about different types of positions and about discovering that she is drawn to data, and then she talked about like thinking like, well, do I really have any skill in that area? And then she shared the following with me, which I thought was a really cool example of looking at what you do and sort of deconstructing it for what are the skills and attributes that are required to do this well, and then extracting that. It's like, okay, what other positions use this? So Valerie, can you take it away?
Sure. Yeah. So in addition to being told that I might be a good judge, I also would get little things that would come back that had to do with data or data analysis. And I thought, well, that's not something that I would see myself doing at all. Um, I just pictured somebody at a computer with all of these numbers in front of them and doing something with graphs and charts. And then when I really thought about what I do, I was like, well, maybe I do have some kind of skill set there, because I do have a lot of data, because I have all of these grades and all of these results from evaluations, and I have to use those to decide whether to change a lesson or to reuse a test, or, eliminate a question, or to sort of guide that next lesson. And so I started to think about maybe data as something that I might be good at. And maybe even enjoy.
Neat. And also I imagine, let's say you notice that the test scores for a particular test you gave are much lower than you expected, then you're like deconstructing like what went wrong here kind of thing.
Something went wrong in the lesson, or something went wrong in the assessment. And so both of those can be something to look into. Also, if you have different results for different groups, different classes, and you think, well, how come this class did so well and this one didn't? What's different about the student? What's different about the way I ran the lesson? Did some outside factor happen? And so really kind of fun to think about those things. And so something that just looked like numbers to me, I started to think about as something that I'd be good at. And I added it to my resume.
There you go. I love it. Way to go. As you were describing it first, like off air, which is why I wanted to record this, and now as you've gone into more detail, it makes me think of a business analyst client where like the stuff that you just described, that's what he helps his different teams at his employer do in the like product launch or marketing campaign. It's like, look at the numbers and then try to analyze, deconstruct, like, why did this happen? What are our possible solutions? What's the, what's the story these numbers are trying to tell us or that we need to extract? So what a perfect example.
I can tell you from my experience that doesn't mean that I'm going to get hired as a business analyst. And so I've realized, well, if I send out that application they're going to send me a rejection letter real fast. But if I were to if a role like that comes up in the company that I'm working for, and I can show that I have those skills, I think that's an area that I might end up moving into something where we do that, maybe even become a business analyst. But I had to kind of stop thinking about jumping right into the role and like, what companies have jobs like that? What else can I do there right away?
Fantastic. So again, that two-step process.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for that addition. Or would you say?
So it's hard to wait. 2 steps is harder than
yeah. Yeah. And as I'm sure you know, the irony is it ends up being faster most of the time because it actually happens.
Yeah.